So let's start. There are two things I want to discuss before we start. The first is for those of you that are working, well, as a reminder, the program is self-paced, meaning when you sign up in your account, you are going to see all the projects that you should complete, and those projects are arranged in the order you should complete them. All you have to do is go through each project one at a time. And what we are doing with the Jira board and the assignment is that anytime you complete a project in your account and you are ready to be tested on that project, let me know and I will assign the appropriate assignment for that project to you. So for now, this is how we are doing it. But in the future, I'll probably just upload the assignment after the project. So for each project, you have the assignment and you can just come to the Jira board, create your ticket here so you can track your progress. So remember, everybody is at a different pace. Just because you see someone doing the reference architecture project now or doing the dynamic project now does not mean you need to be on that project if you haven't completed the previous projects. So work at your own pace and you'll be fine. Also, try not to have ticket for two projects on the board. So let's say we've done, like, we are on our third assignment now. Try not to, if you are still on assignment 1, that is where you are. Finish assignment 1 and understand everything you are doing in that assignment, because all these assignments you are doing, we are taking it a step further in each one and we are building on it. So try your best to get all the knowledge you need to get in the first assignment, then you move on to the second and the third. So just because you are still on 1 and you see that now we are on assignment 3, don't create a ticket for assignment 3 when you haven't completed assignment 1. So complete each assignment. Once you have completed the assignment, put it in review, then you can create your ticket for the next assignment. Also, another thing I want to mention is, since we are all managing the Jira board, this is exactly what it is going to be like when you start working. You have to create your ticket. For majority of the projects I've worked on, I think I only had one project where we had a Scrum Master that creates our ticket. But for the most part, I'll say 90% of the time, you have to create your ticket. And it is something you have to get used to doing. When you create your ticket, you have access to other people's ticket on the boards too. The reason why we are using the Jira board here is so that you get familiar with it. And when you are creating your ticket, remember what I said, all you have to do when you come to this page. So make sure you are on the projects page. Once you are on the projects page, our project is AWS Cloud DevOps. So once you are on the projects page, our project is AWS Cloud DevOps. When you are here, all you have to do is click create. When you click create, this is going to pop up. Then here, you enter the name of the ticket you are trying to create. So under this dropdown, there is tags, there is story, but just leave it on story. To create a ticket, you enter the name, create EC2. Once you create your ticket name, you write the description. Once you write the description and something is wrong, I think this is the reason why I'm giving this demo, because as everyone is trying to figure out how to create the ticket, someone is mistakenly changing the configuration. So there shouldn't be anything in here. So if in case I will fix this later on, let me cancel and try again and see what I get. If I still get the same thing. Yeah, someone did something to the configuration that is populating this in here. This shouldn't be in here. So that's why I'm saying be careful when you are creating the ticket. So once you click create up there, this pops up. For now, if you guys are creating ticket until I fix the issue, if you are seeing anything under your description, just delete it. Then you enter the name for the ticket. Once you enter the name for the ticket, you enter your description. Once you enter your description, scroll down. All these other ones, you can leave it as default, but under assignee here, if you click assign to me, it will assign it to you. But remember that I said when you create your ticket, name it after your name. So that way I know whose ticket that is. Then you can assign it to your name, but this wouldn't be relevant because I will only be able to tell that it is your ticket if I look at the summary and I see your name there. Then the only other thing you have to do here is the sprint. Whatever sprint we are currently on, if you click this drop down, it will show up here. So you have to select the sprint to be able to see the ticket on the board. I'll create 2 tickets and I'll show you guys 2 scenarios you are going to run into. Let's say in this first scenario, I'm creating my ticket and I forgot to select the sprint here. All these other ones, I don't have to fill it out. For the story point, you guys can put 3 points for the story. So remember we said the story point is how difficult the work is or how long it is going to take you to complete the work. So once you add the points, it is not necessary, but I still want you to know that when they assign work to you, what would determine how long it takes for you to complete the work is the amount of points that is assigned to the ticket. So in this first scenario, I am creating my story, but I didn't select a sprint. If you click create, you won't see the story on the board. Then here you'll start to wonder where did the story that I created go. The best way to find it is if you click on backlog here. This is the current sprint up here. Again, don't change anything in here. This is our current sprint. You can see it. Then if you scroll all the way down here, you can see the ticket I just created is there. If you don't select the sprint, what I'm saying is if you don't select the sprint, if you forgot to select the sprint when you are creating the ticket, once you create the ticket, it will go in the backlog. Once you select backlog here, you'll see it down here under backlog. All you have to do is just drag it up here and click confirm. Then now if I go back to the board, the ticket is there. Then you can select it. And another thing I need to do is you can add it to in progress here, or you can just click it and drag it here. So that's all you need to do to create your ticket. It is a very simple process. Click create. I'll do the other one for the second scenario. You're going to click create. It is a story. You give it a summary. Once you give it a summary here, you add your description. I'll fix this later on. I'm not sure we changed the settings, so that pops in there. So you give it a summary, you give it a description. Once you enter your description, assign to me, and under sprint, this is where you select the current sprint. So we are on sprint 5. Someone ended the sprint. We should be on sprint 4, but somehow someone ended the sprint and I had to restart it. So now it is on sprint 5. That is why you guys are seeing 9 days left here. So on that sprint, I'm going to select, you will see the current sprint here, select it, and you'll get this warning. It's fine. Just leave it like that. And story point, you can add 3 and click create. Once you click create, you see it pops up on the board. Then if you need to edit it, you can edit it and do what you need to do, save your work. So that is how you create your ticket. Try not to modify someone else's ticket and try not to delete someone else's ticket because you have the access to do that. So just keep it simple, create your ticket, and work with your own ticket. And also try writing your own ticket. So I've given you guys the details for the assignment, what you need to do. Part of what you have to do is write your own ticket. So get used to writing your Jira ticket instead of copying it out of what someone else wrote. That is it for this one. Do you guys have any questions? Yes, since I'm using the free version, they don't let me do all those adding user policies to restrict people's access. And it's very expensive to pay for one. So we're just going to have to work with this for now. All right, so on this board, all you have to do is create your ticket. And if you create a ticket, you don't like it, you want to delete it, you can delete the ticket, select it, delete it. And this is the other one I created. I'm going to delete it. Remember anything, when you create a ticket, if you don't see it on the board, most likely you forgot to select the sprint. So you'll see it in the backlog, which the backlog is down here. You can see now I don't have anything in there. That's the first thing I want to say. Then next, for those of you that are working on the reference architecture, please understand that the importance of the reference architecture is to communicate how the application you are hosting in AWS, how it works in terms of the resources you are using to host that application. So you have a reference architecture that both technical and non-technical people can look at, and they can see the visual representation of the services you are using to deploy that application. The reason why it is good for you to learn how to create reference architecture now is because when you start working, Well, let me say, chances are you won't go into a new project where they are just building everything from scratch. You most likely will be working on a project that everything has already been built. Part of the things they will give you on your first day at work is they would have maybe like a 1 hour demo with you on their infrastructure, where to find the codes, what the reference architecture looks like. They will just send a bunch of information to you. And it is up to you to get yourself up to speed on the infrastructure you are going to be working with, the services they are using in there, and how those services are connected to each other. The best way for you to learn that is by looking at their reference architecture. So they'll give you a reference architecture for the application that you will look at. For the reference architecture, you just need to be able to look at it and tell that, okay, we are using this here, we are using a VPC, we are using public and private subnet, and so on. That's the main purpose of why I have assigned these tags for you guys to complete a reference architecture. I've showed you guys in the demo, it is very simple to create. It is a drag and drop feature, right? When you are creating your reference architecture, try not to rush it and try to be, sorry, I'm trying to add someone. When you are creating your reference architecture, try not to rush it and also be detail oriented when you are, yes, I'll add you to the group. But I'll come back to the group thing, but I'll finish my point on this. When you are creating your reference architecture, try not to rush it and also be detail oriented. I've created a reference architecture here and I've just intentionally put things where they don't belong, which when I'm reviewing some of the reference architecture that some of you have submitted, these are the common mistakes that I've seen. These are the common mistake I saw in it. When we have our reference architecture, we have a VPC here, for example, a VPC with public and private subnets in 2 different availability zones. We are going to use an S3 bucket as one of the resources we will use to host our application. When you are creating the image for the S3 bucket on your reference architecture, be very mindful of where you put that resources. For example, this boundary is for VPC, meaning that anything in this boundary goes in the VPC. So when you are putting your S3 bucket, I'm not saying I saw this on anybody's reference architecture, but I saw some common mistakes of putting the resources where they don't belong. When you are putting your S3 in this reference architecture, be mindful that one of the questions you should ask yourself is, where does this service go? That is part of your learning process. That is how you know. And if you don't know, just log into the management console and see. As you guys know, S3 does not go into a VPC. S3 is a region-based service. Like when you create an S3 bucket, you select the region you want to create the S3 bucket in. So this S3 bucket should not be in the VPC. It should be here in the region. Because you can see this, if I can zoom in here, this is the region boundary. So these are the things you should pay attention to. Here, the EC2 instance connect endpoint. Is this a service that belongs in the region, or does this service belongs in the AWS cloud, or does this service go in our VPC? These are the questions you should ask yourself. And from the reference architecture that AWS provided, the EC2 instance connect endpoint is in the AWS cloud. It is not in our region and it is not in our VPC. It is in the AWS cloud. So this needs to be here. And also the same thing goes for Route 53. Is Route 53 going to be in your region, or is it like a service that is in the AWS cloud? I believe it's in the AWS cloud. So here, it needs to go here. And how you will know where a service belongs is when you are creating the service, these are the options you would have to pick. If the service belongs in a VPC, for example, an EC2 instance, you would have to select the VPC and the subnet you want to put the EC2 instance in. Similarly, for S3 bucket, when you are creating an S3 bucket, AWS will ask you to select the region you want to create the S3 bucket in. So this is how you know where to put those resources on your reference architecture. And the last one is the application load balancer here. Does it belong in the private subnet? No. Application load balancer always functions in the public subnet. So here, we are just going to put it here. And notice that I'm putting the application load balancer in the middle here instead of putting it in the subnet, because the application load balancer, they have a reach to the public subnet and they function in it. But I don't think like we physically like put them in the subnet, but that is something I need to look up. But I've always done it like this. where the application load balancer has a reach to the public subnet, but we don't physically put it in there. But even if you, because if you think about it, we only create one application load balancer and we have two subnets. We have two public subnets. So we can't put one in two subnets. So that just means we have one application load balancer, but it has a reach to the subnets. If you want to do something about something having a reach, you can just type, what I always do is I'll do availability here. And this orange thing always pop up. I'll just use it. That is why when you guys look on my reference architecture, you will see something like this. So this just means that I'm communicating that this application load balancer has a reach to those two subnets. So you can do something like that. It is acceptable. Or you can add nodes on your reference architecture. And remember I said to point an arrow to any other service, if you hover over the first service that you are trying to point the arrow from, you get all these blue arrows. All you have to do is click one of it and just touch the next thing. Once you click it, click and hold it, it will bring out the arrow. All you have to do is touch the next thing you want to point to. So I've touched the EC2 instance, it has created the arrow. And at that point, you can adjust the arrow however you want to adjust it. So you can drag it down here. You can drag this out here. And this is how you adjust the arrow. So when you are creating your reference architecture to try to make it as clean as you can. So this is what I wanted to also mention about creating the reference architecture, things to be mindful of when you are creating it. Does anyone have any question? Okay, cool. The third thing I want to mention is when you are working on the next project, which is going to be a dynamic application. One of the questions I get a lot is, how do you come up with the code for the application? How do you know what to install? And I've created these steps you can follow for any application you are trying to deploy, right? And this is similar. Well, it's not similar. This is a step that I learned from work that we use at work all the time. So the first thing is, what type of application are you trying to host? For every different type of website you would deploy for your company or application, right? The code for the application will be written in different language. I mean, like the code might be, for example, it might be an application that is a Node application. For whatever framework they are using for that application, the installation process is different for every application. So the first thing you want to know is, yes, the recorded video is on. I post the recordings. The link is in the Slack channel. I'll also share the link again so you can have it. So you can see the recording for this week's and all the past weeks we've done. I'll post the link to the playlist. So for every application that you are trying to host, the first question you need to ask yourself is, what type of application? What is the framework for this application? Is it a Node application? Is it a Java application? Once you know the framework, the reason why this question is important is because, like I said, for every application, the installation process will be different. It might be similar, but expect it to be different. Then once you know the framework, that can be the foundation to help you with the rest of your installation. So that is the first thing. I just know the type of application you are trying to deploy, the framework for the application. Then once here I should probably just put framework. Once you know the framework for the application, the next question you are going to ask yourself, which this is the next thing you would do after you've done the research on the framework, is what type of hardware are you going to use to host the application? For example, are you going to use an EC2 instance or are you going to use a container? This part is very simple because whether it's a personal project you are working on or at your company, they will tell you what to use. If they want to use an EC2 instance, they will let you know. If they want to use a container, they will let you know. The next thing, once you figure out the hardware you are going to use and you launch your EC2 instance, for example, we are using EC2 instance to host this application. The next thing you need to ask is, what are the softwares you need to install on that EC2 instance for your applications, for your application to function? Remember I said you have to figure out the framework for the application, then you figure out the hardware, which here we are using an EC2 instance. Once you launch an EC2 instance, remember EC2 does not come with all the packages that exist for all the applications in the world because they just give you a plain EC2 instance and you have to install the packages you want on that EC2 instance based on the application you are trying to host. That is why I said understanding the framework for your application is the first thing. Then once you launch your EC2 instance, the next thing you need to do is install the necessary softwares that the application needs to function. And this is where I get most of the question is, how do I know what software to install? Since it is not your job to write the application code at your company, you guys will have front-end, back-end engineers. It depends on the company you work for. But I'm going to say, as a cloud engineer, it is not your job or your responsibility to write the code for the application. You have developers on your team that writes the code. When they write the code, they will tell you what you need to install on your EC2 instance for the application to function properly. So pretty much they'll tell you the requirements that your server must meet. Here for the next application that you guys are going to be deploying for the dynamic application, these are the instructions the developer sent to me on what the requirements for the server, meaning that these are the softwares I need to install on the server for that application to function. In terms of knowing what software to install on the server, the developer will tell you the softwares you need to install. You also learn some of the softwares you need to install on the server if you've worked with that framework before and you just know, okay, for this framework, your server needs to have PHP, it needs to have MySQL or whatever. But it is the developer that will tell you the software you need to install. Your job as a cloud engineer is to know how to install this software on your EC2 instance. So once you launch your EC2 instance, you know you need to install PHP version 7.3 or higher. You need to install MySQL version 5 or more. You need to install OpenSSL PHP extension. You need to install PDO PHP extension and so on. So once you have all this instruction, it is your responsibility as a cloud engineer to know how to install these things. And how we find the answer to it is on Google. And even better yet now, there's ChatGPT. You can type it in there. For example, this is what I would do to make my life easier now. Since even I myself, I probably don't know the command. Well, I don't know the command to install PHP on an EC2 instance. It is not compulsory that you memorize all the commands. Just do a research on it. You can either Google it or ask ChatGPT. So here, I'm just going to say, I want to install PHP 7.3. So here I just type, I want to install PHP version 7.3 on Amazon Linux 2 EC2 instance. I'm going to press enter and I'll see what command it gives me. So here it is giving me the commands. It might give you more than you need. Once I'm looking at this, I know I have to update my EC2 instance. We always do that. And here it is telling me to download the repository, add the repository, right? This is the command for that. And here it is telling me to install PHP and some PHP extensions. This is the command for that. And once I do that, it is here showing me how to check the version that I just installed. This is pretty much all I need. The rest of this, I don't need this. So this is how you get the command. And how you get the command is once you look for it, the same thing that I did here. Let's say you don't want to use ChatGPT. You can use Google. I can search for this in Google. And you can see someone already wrote an article how to install PHP version 7.4 on EC2 instance here. If I select this and scroll down here, you can see some of the steps they've written. And how you will know what works is you have to launch an EC2 instance, run these commands that you either get from Google or ChatGPT on the EC2 instance to check whether it works. If that command works, you add it to your notes. So that way, you know for this step to install PHP version 7.3, you already have the command for that. Then you move on to the next, which is MySQL, and you just follow the same process. That is it for the software part. Then the last thing you need to do is once you have installed the necessary software that your application needs to run, then you can install your application on the EC2 instance, and you also need to configure the application. You guys, for some of you guys that have deployed Jenkins before, you guys know that once you install Jenkins, then there are still some additional configuration you have to do at the end. that is the last thing you do once you have installed the software. You install your application and you set the configuration that is required for that application to function properly. Again, the configuration you have to set on your server for the application to function properly is different based on the framework for the application. So those are the ways you will use to deploy an application. Remember, you need to know the framework for the application, the type of hardware you are going to use. Are you using an EC2 instance or container? The softwares that are required to be installed on your server for the application to function properly, and what you need to configure on your server for the application to function properly. These are the steps we use at work every day to deploy an application. We actually have our playbook, our Ansible playbook. Actually, we go step by step. Obviously, the first one is for you to just know the framework. Our playbook goes, we have to run the hardware playbook first, and that is going to create the EC2 instance. Then once we create the EC2 instance, we will run the software playbook that will install all the necessary softwares that the application needs to function. Then after that, we will run the configuration playbook that would install the application and configure whatever settings it needs to configure. So when you guys ask, how do you know how to get the commands and how to come up with everything I need to deploy an application, this is the steps we use. This is the step I use, and this is what I've also seen at work that we used to. So that is it for what I wanted to present today. Does anyone have any questions? I think, Tisha, you had your hand up. Did I answer your question at some point, or you just changed your mind?
Yes, I had a question on the reference architecture, and that's why when you started this, I had to put my hands down, listen to what you said. And yes, I have a question on this topic you just just mentioned right now.
Okay.
Firstly, let me start with this one, the last one first. These are the steps you used to take to install a software on an instance. Okay. Say we like the last two assignments we did, right?
Mm-hmm.
Did this follow? Like I'm seeing, like for example, I saw Studio Sue. Okay, we've already launched our instance. Now we've already SSH into the instance. We start with the Studio Sue. We start with the YOM update. We start with the install -y HTTPD. Then we do all that. Where does this comes in? Where does this come in that process?
Okay. So in the last assignment you guys work on, this is a high level step before you even start running the command. Remember, okay. I said, I need to know, first of all, let's take that application, for example. You are trying to, the first step, maybe I should have introduced this earlier enough. So in the first step here, we said we need to know the framework. For that application you guys hosted, the framework was HTML, okay. Right? So now that we know the framework, what hardware are we going to use to launch it? We said we were using EC2, right? Then what software do we need to install on the EC2 instance to host an HTML website, right? So that is where I said you do your research, right? So here I can say, let me just add ChatGPT. I'll just say, I want to install. For HTML website, we know we can use Apache. There are different servers you can use. You can use Nginx, you can use Apache. I'm just going to say I want to install HTML server and see what I come up with, HTML. I'll just say I want to install HTML website on. So here I'm just going to say I want to install an HTML website on an Amazon Linux 2 EC2 instance. So you can say it gave me all this instruction, and here, now this is where you get to your YOM update, your install HTTPD. This is how you get the commands that you use in that step. So the question you're asking about, at what stage is that where we are doing the YOM update, installing it is at this stage where we are installing the necessary softwares on our EC2 instance that our application needs to function.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yes, it does make sense. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. I was just overthinking. Yeah, and I was talking about the
reference architecture.
Reference architecture, yes. While I was working on my reference architecture, right, I noticed that it took me a while, or it was very hard for me to find the logo or logo for the EC2 Instance Connect endpoint, because if you type it there on draw.io, you won't see it.
Yeah.
And I kept researching. So what I just did was I went to I know it has AWS 2000, AWS 19 or 17. If you check down,
Mhm.
I'm sure most of us, because it was a problem for me to find this,
Mhm.
and I'm sure most of us would have that problem too.
Sure.
I know that lastly I found it under the VPC instance code. It connects something like that from the AWS 2018, AWS 18 or 19.
Mhm.
It was endpoint. So I mean, that logo was called endpoint.
Yeah.
It was called endpoint because if you just type endpoint on your search, you would find it. Then for the other one, it was called Elastic Network Interface.
Yeah. Yeah. So that is a good point. Sometimes when guys are working with draw.io, this search thing here is not the best, but it is good enough. Let's say I type something that the search can't find, it wouldn't find anything. If you are trying to find a particular logo that you see that I have on my reference architecture, or you've seen it elsewhere in other people's reference architecture, but you don't know you don't know what name it is stored under in here, feel free to ask me in the Slack channel, or put it or ask other members. I will try to answer it, but I definitely understand what you mean, Tisha. Sometimes it also happens to me when I'm looking for the first time I worked on this reference architecture too, it took me a while to find this logo because I didn't know what it was stored under, but I figured out, I just typed endpoint and I found it there. So to solve that problem, if you are looking for a particular resource and you can't find it, let me know. We can look for it together. Most likely it is stored under a different name that you are not typing in here in the search box.
Thank you very much. That'll be all.
No problem. Olari, why'd you go ahead?
Yeah, good afternoon, Aziz.
Good afternoon.
Yeah, so I want to ask about the steps, know your application. Can you please just go back to that page?
Okay, sure.
Please, can you share this?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, I will share with you guys in the Slack channel.
What's the difference? I think my major problem is with the number one, the dynamic website.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So I'm mixing something up.
Okay, sure.
We said something about LAMP.
Okay.
Stack. Okay. I want to understand if that is different from this framework, because I just want to know the available frameworks that we have, and if we have the common ones that you can probably share with us, just type the names here and we can probably look on our own, just look them up.
Exactly. Okay, that's a good question.
I'm finding it hard to differentiate between, because I saw from your video that, the LAMP stack, that's the one with Linux, Apache, MySQL, and PHP. Mm-hmm. So here again, I'm saying, these steps and these are the things that you actually do day to day.
Yes.
So live your life and probably understand what you do with other frameworks are available. Because I know that dynamic, I don't think there'll be only one framework for that. And exactly. I don't know if then HTML is the only framework for static.
Yes, exactly. That's a good question. So there are a lot of frameworks, and I don't even think I know them all. I know LAMP because I use that a lot, and at work we use LAMP stack. So let's look up LAMP stack here, LAMP stack. And I can tell that you understand it because you mentioned some of the things that is used for. You can even see on AWS, what is a LAMP stack? So here, it is just giving us a summary for it. So you can see a LAMP is an acronym for operating system, Linux. So the L stands for Linux, and the web server that you are going to use to host your static asset is Apache. That is what the A stands for. And the database, the software you are going to use to host your database server is MySQL. That's what the M stands for. And the programming language you are going to use is PHP, right? So if we copy this, we can still see that this ties into what we are saying here. So I'm going to copy this and I'll put it here. I'll just paste it somewhere here, right? What a LAMP does is it helps you understand. The acronym LAMP actually answers all these questions at once. Because if you look within it, the framework is LAMP, right? Then under hardware, we are saying that what hardware are we using to host our application? It already tells you here that it has to be a Linux hardware. So you can either choose whether you are using a Linux EC2 instance or you are using a Linux Docker container. So that is how we get here. And the next one is the softwares that must be installed for your application to run. Here, they are telling you in a LAMP stack, you need to install Apache, which you know when we are deploying our application, we install Apache. We need to install MySQL. If you look here, I need to install MySQL as part of the next dynamic application you guys are hosting, which is also a LAMP stack, and we need to install PHP. The developer told me that my server must have PHP install, MySQL install, and for any type of application you are hosting that has static asset like HTML, we always install Apache. You can either use Apache or Nginx. So here, since we are using the LAMP stack framework, we know that in the LAMP stack framework, Apache is the web server engine we need to use. So that's why we are using that. And I was trying to think ahead how you can get, it is not necessary that you know all the frameworks that are out there. You would know them as you install them. So let's say at your company, they want to install this application and this is whatever framework they are using for it. From that process, you will learn it. Or let's say you want to work on a project that use a different framework just to learn it. Those are the ways you will learn it, but it is not necessary to know all the frameworks that are out there. I'll say it's just the high level knowledge that you need to understand. Once you know the framework, then you can drill it down to, from this framework, what type of server do I want to use? Once you pick your server, whether it's EC2 or a Docker container, then you say, for whatever framework it is, you can Google it. What are the software requirements that my server needs to meet? The answers will be online. So to answer your questions about the different framework, we can ask ChatGPT because I don't know myself. So let's say I'm just going to type something like, just asking ChatGPT, you can see that it gave me a list of another 15 lists. There are even other ones out there. I can't say I've installed any of this before, but I'll say when it comes to the framework, your developer will tell you what framework that application was built in, right? So once you have that information, your job as a cloud engineer is to now start drilling down from there, finding the requirements, the software requirements that are required for you to be able to deploy that application on your server. So I'll say at this stage, it is not really important for you to memorize all this and know all this. So you can see there's 15 that ChatGPT listed here, but there are even probably several more. Did I answer your question?
Yeah, thank you. Noted. I just dump the list so I can.
Yes, I will clean it up and I'll send it to you guys once after class today.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
No problem. I think someone else had their question. They've probably dropped their hand, but I can't remember who. Does anyone have any question?
Sorry, this is not about what we discussed today.
Okay.
Just about like work generally, like getting employment and opportunities.
Mm-hmm.
In your experience, would you say that like in the US here, it's easier for like to get contract gigs, and what resource do you use like to get those kind of contract gigs, or do you think it is easier to get like a full-time job? In the US, since I'm not a cloud engineer in like other place, I'm not sure how it would compare to other places, but in US, it is easy to find jobs because there are so many different firms you can go on, and there are a lot of companies here that are looking for cloud engineer with the skills to help them host their application. So for me, I use Indeed. I only use Indeed. And I like Indeed because I can show you now if I just log into Indeed. It probably already has me logged in already. That's the only one I use. And I like Indeed because it has the easy apply. So here, I'll just search for whatever I'm looking for. Let's say I'm looking for cloud engineer or DevOps. And here under where, I'm just going to click, I'm going to type remote because I'm only looking for remote work. Then there are also other filters here you can add. I think there is one for pay here. There's one for pay.
they've switched it since the last time I used it, but here I'm just going to put DevOps engineer. Here I can even be specific. I'll say AWS DevOps engineer, where remote search. Once you search, then you can see there is like, I'm getting like 2,400 relevant results. From there, I just go down the list and read the job description. If it is something I can do, I'll apply to it. They have an easy apply, so I can literally do 50 of these applications in a day. That is what I use. I've always found success in the number. So you guys don't apply to one job or two jobs and say, oh, you know what, I've applied, I'm not getting a response back. You have to just keep applying to as many as you can of the ones you know you can do, because you just don't know who's going to get back to you. So I like the easy apply because it allows you to apply to as many jobs that you feel you qualify for as you can. This is the steps that I use, but you can use, there's LinkedIn. Other people that I've spoken to, they find success using LinkedIn. There is Zip Recruiter. So there's different opportunities. But to answer your questions, yes, a lot of companies are in America that are looking for cloud engineer. So it might be easier to find jobs here because there are just companies here that are looking for people with your skills. But the good thing about doing remote work is I always encourage those that I mentor, and I'm telling you guys now that once you build the skills, there is nothing really stopping you from that. Once you know how to do all these things, I am challenging you, and I'm also encouraging you to take it a step further. Certainly try to find a 9-to-5 job. I have a 9-to-5 job, but in addition to that, try to create other lanes for yourself. You can work as a freelancer. You can try to teach other people. You can try to mentor other people that are trying to learn about cloud. There's just so many things you can do with it instead of the 9-to-5. So I'll say to do the 9-to-5, I use Indeed to look for work. Then in addition to the 9-to-5, I'm doing stuff like this where I'm meeting with you guys. I have people that I mentor and things like that. So I'll tell you, do that as well. And there are other sites too that you can work as a freelancer. So if the 9-to-5, what I'm saying is if the 9-to-5 is not coming fast enough, like I started doing my YouTube channel before I got a job. My YouTube channel just came about based on me trying to share the projects that I've worked on. So I'm saying just don't focus on the 9-to-5. Try to be creative and see other things you can do with it. But for me, I use Indeed. Do you have any other questions?
No, good. Thanks.
No problem. Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, I think my question is with regards to the Route 53. After we do the projects, you ask us to clean up so that we don't incur any charges. And then we delete the A record. Mm-hmm. Are we supposed to delete the certificates as well?
You can leave it. You can you're talking about the record that was created for the SSL certificate.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Someone else asked this question during the week. A good guide is at the end of the video, I have the cleanup there. So whatever I tell you guys to clean up that. If I didn't say clean up this, leave it. It is not going to cost you. And to answer your question, yeah, the A record that was created for your SSL certificate, you can leave that. You can even leave your SSL certificate in your account. And for every project you continue to do, just keep using the same certificate. Because if you delete that record and you create it, it is going to be the same thing AWS is going to create there again. It is going to be the same A record and the same SSL certificate. I mean, the encryption might be different, but the A record will be the same. And let's say you manually create that A record there, you didn't delete it, and you work on the Terraform project. When AWS is creating it, it is not going to affect it. So to answer your questions, yes, leave the A record. You don't have to delete it.
I asked this because I deleted my A record, right? And then I created it again while I was doing the WordPress project. Mm-hmm. However, when I copied the DNS name of my Elastic Load, the load balancer, it worked. Then I created the A record, but then it wasn't working. I deleted it. I tried it again and still wasn't working. So I was wondering if it was because I didn't delete the certificate before. I don't know why it isn't working.
Oh, no. So if you are trying to access your site from your A record for your mm-hmm. domain name and it's not working, that is not has to do with your SSL certificate. That has to do with maybe there's something wrong in your security groups, or maybe there's something wrong in your security groups, or there's just something with the routing in your VPC. The SSL certificate is for when you are doing the HTTPS, when you are trying to add this lock icon there on your site to make it secure. So that's what that certificate is for. But if you add your A record and it is not coming up, I can certainly help you troubleshoot after it is caused by other issues, not because you left the A record certificate there. No.
Okay, but because sorry, I'm dragging this.
No, you're fine.
Okay, because the load balancer is working, it works, like the load balancer works. So why is it I just switched and it's not working? Yeah, and you're right. It gave me proxy something. That was the error I was seeing. Proxy something.
Yeah, so we would have to look in your VPC. Maybe something is wrong with your security groups or your routing table. So that would be the two places I'll look. I'll check my VPC to make sure my route tables, all the routes are configured properly, and my security groups are configured properly. That is the two places I will look.
Okay, all right, I'll check it. Thank you.
Yeah, no problem. And if you want me to help you look at it too, we can look at it together.
Unfortunately, I deleted everything, but I'll try it again if I'm stuck. All right, thank you.
Sure, no problem. Yeah, Afiz, the program is self-paced. Welcome to the program. I'm certainly happy to have you here. The program is self-paced. So in your account, you will see a list of projects you need to complete. You start going through all those projects one at a time. When you finish project one, where we deployed an HTML website on an EC2 instance, then reach out to me. I will assign the assignment to you for that project. So since you are just joining, you are going at your own pace. Whatever project you've completed, let me know when you are ready for the assignment and I will assign it to you.
Oh, okay. Thank you very much.
No problem.
So I was about to ask you as to how I'll be able to join a group, but you just answered that. When I'm done with
okay, I think I will create an Excel sheet and I'll have all the groups there, and I would kind of like leave it up to you guys to help other people join I would say for those that are already in a group, be open-minded to other people joining your group, because it is good that in your group, you have a mixture of some people that have experience, some people that are in between, and some people that are just starting out. You can kind of help each other out. So what I would say is, once I create the group thing, whatever group you want to join, feel free to add your name there and reach out to the group member and join those groups. I'm only saying it this way because sometimes it might take me some time to get back to you, and I don't want you to feel like that is a blocker for you doing your work. So the group is just there as another additional layer of resources that you can use, people you can reach out to, because they are going through the same experience you are going through. They've probably worked on the projects you'll be working on. So if you run into any issue, you can reach out to them. They will help you out. You can also reach out to me. So that is what the group is meant for. But in terms of starting your work and completing your work, if I haven't assigned you to a group now, it shouldn't hold you back from doing your work. But whoever I have not added to the group, I will add you at some point. And also in the Slack channel I know we are doing the Jira board. Each group member has a Jira board that they are accessing from their group email. If I have not assigned you to a group, right, I've created general credentials here somewhere. And I'll try to pin it. I'll comment it again. It is here. So if you want to join the Jira board to add your ticket and start tracking your ticket, this is the username and password you can use. I would put it here. I'll probably have to, but maybe I'll just blow it up, but I'll put it here. Yeah, so that is the username and password you can use. But I'll add you guys to the group at some point.
Okay, thank you very much. I have a second question.
Sure.
With regards to the first project, deploying your static website, I was wondering if you already have an IP, is there a way you can use your domain name, like you already have a domain name posted somewhere else? Yeah,
so
it's not on yeah.
Yeah, so you're saying sorry. So you're saying for that project, is there a way to use a domain name instead of the IP?
No, so I'm saying that on that project you registered a new domain name on Route 53. So my question is, if you already have a domain name that you want to use for the project, you don't want to register a new one.
Okay. Yeah. So
Yeah,
so I'm sorry. It's like the sound is probably is like delaying on my end, so that's why it seems like I'm over talking you. But I think I got what you are saying. If you already have a domain name that is registered somewhere that you want to use, you would have to first import that domain name into AWS. Then once you transfer the domain name into AWS, you can use it. Yeah, AWS allows you to do that.
okay.
Yeah. And if you need, I haven't done that before because I've always registered all my domain name with AWS. But and I'm sure the steps to do that is very straightforward. If you Google it, you will see. But if you need help finding it, or you found a step, you don't understand some of the instructions on the steps, let me know. Then I'll walk you through it.
All right, thank you.
No problem. Who else has their hand up? All
Hello,
right.
Aziz.
Hello, Bjorn. How are you?
Yeah, I'm good. Thank you for your time and the teaching all the time.
No problem. You're welcome.
We appreciate what you're doing. I have a small challenge. I'm having issues, trying to SSH into my EC2 instance. My computer just prompted me that I should do some updates, and I just clicked on it, and boom, ever since, I've been troubleshooting. I don't know how to go about it. So probably maybe after the class, you can put me through and help me with that problem.
Sure. I would. Yeah, after class, I can help you look at it.
Thank you.
No problem. Hafiz, go ahead.
Okay, hello.
Hey, how are you?
I'm good. So about what you said the other time, I think I've completed the project 1 and project 2. So about the static website and deploying the WordPress website on an EC2 instance. So I've done that one. So, but my question is about my my SSH. When I want to SSH into my into my instance, when I'm creating the SSH traffic and everything, I'm always limiting the traffic to my IP address.
Mm-hmm.
But anytime I try to SSH into it, I get connection timeout error.
Yeah.
But when I change the SSH traffic to everywhere, I'm always able to SSH into my instance. So I don't know the reason.
Are you sure whether the Wi-Fi you are using there, or you have some type of thing on your computer that is blocking? Sometimes the Wi-Fi or the network you are connected to may have certain settings in it that is blocking you from using SSH. Some people have it. So that could be the reason why when you change it to anywhere, you can SSH, but then when you limit it to your IP address, it is blocking it. So that may have to do specifically with your Wi-Fi, or like it could be, if you have some type of security thing on your computer, it could be that too.
Okay, because the thing is this, I'm not able to use PuTTY on my system as well because I'm using a Windows system.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so you're not using PuTTY. What are you using?
I'm using normal, the PowerShell to SSH into my instance.
Okay, PowerShell. Okay. Yeah, there's a reason. Anytime you get connection timeout, it has to do with your security group. Okay. And since your security group, that is where we are limiting it to our IP or the word. You understand that when you change it to the word, it allows you to SSH, but when you limit it to your IP address, you are having an error there.
Yes.
So I can help you look at it, but if I was to take a guess now, I would say it has to do with something either on your computer or your network that is blocking you from. When I was learning, I would do some practice at work when I used to work at my other job. And anytime I log into their Wi-Fi and I try to SSH, I always get the same error.
Okay.
Yeah, so it could be that, but I can help you look at it at some point but I'm certain it's that. But what I also recommend is, you guys saw the new EC2 Instance Connect endpoint that AWS just released. I've used it since it came out, and it works perfectly fine to connect to EC2 instance in the public subnet and private subnet. So I would recommend that you guys be open-minded to start using that as well. Just understand the SSH, how to connect your instance using SSH, just in case if your company will use SSH.
Okay.
Also understand how to use the endpoint, because a lot of companies might also decide to start using that endpoint because it is easier. So understand both processes. So if you have an issue with one, so that it is not a blocker, use the other method, then at some point I can help you look at it. But I'm certain it has to do with your network or your IP.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
No problem. Someone said they have question on the WordPress project, you can ask your question, or you can type it to me if you don't want to. Okay, go ahead. I see you speaking.
All right. Yeah. Thank you. Just looking at the project for WordPress, you said the reason why we are using EFS was to be able to share files in the different availability zones. So I've gone through that project, but I'm still trying to grab the concept. I still don't understand when we were able to kind of like pull something from EFS during that, or yeah, so that's why I was a little bit confused, because yes, I did not see when we kind of like made use of that, or I just wanted you to just kind of like just explain it a little bit. Maybe I'm missing something. That's the question I have. Yeah.
Sure. Let me open the reference architecture and we'll go through it. That is the first one. This is the reference architecture for the WordPress project. And this is the reference architecture for a dynamic application that is not using EFS. So let's start from here. The reason when we use an EC2 instance and we are not using EFS, the EC2 instance use the block store, right? EBS, they use EBS. And please excuse my drawing. So when they use EBS, you guys know that the EBS is just a storage, a virtual storage that is attached to your EC2 instance. You guys know that two EC2 instances cannot share the same EBS, meaning that these two EC2 instances cannot share the same storage. So that means that this EC2 instance will have its own storage and this EC2 instance will have its own storage. So let's say you need to make a change in your application code. At that point, you have to SSH into this EC2 instance, make the change here. But remember that since these EC2 instances are using separate storage, whatever change you make here is not going to show up here. So you would have to SSH into this EC2 instance as well and make your change there. So that is in a scenario where you are using an EC2 instance that is using block storage and we are not using EFS. Is that clear? Do you understand this part?
Yeah, that makes sense. Thank you.
Okay, cool. So now let's go to the EFS. So hold on to that concept. Let's go to EFS. You can see that it is the same reference architecture. We are using two EC2 instances. Now we are using an EFS here. The EFS is just there. And in our VPC, we have mount targets here. So when we launch an EC2 instance, before we even go there, we have mount target. The mount target are attached to the EFS. So the mount target, they are always in our VPC and they are connected to the EFS. So what I'm saying is that the first time when we did our WordPress project, we launched a setup server here, right? We installed WordPress on it. And during the process, remember when we set up the setup server and during the process of our installation, we mounted it to the mount target, which is connected to the EFS. So during the process here, what I'm saying is when we were installing everything, everything from the moment where we mount our EC2 instance to the mount target, that means that anything we are installing is being stored in the EFS. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does.
Okay. So now when we delete our setup server, right? We deleted our setup server and it doesn't matter if we launch 200 EC2 instance here. Any EC2 instance we launch, all we have to do is add the command to mount those EC2 instance to the mount target. And those EC2 instance will be now getting the web files from here. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does. Thank you.
Because if you look in the, let me see if I can find it real quick. Okay, so this is the code that, remember after we did our setup server and we installed WordPress, everything is working. When we did our setup server, let me even start from there. When we were installing WordPress, this is the command we used to mount our server to the EFS. You remember this command, right? So at the moment you run this command to mount it to your EFS, it means that everything you are installing here your application code, anything you install for WordPress will be stored in the EFS. So what I'm saying is that when we now run additional servers, right, this EC2 instance we are running here, any of these new EC2 instance we are running, in the script we are using here, we are mounting it to the EFS. So that is how those EC2 instances are connecting to the EFS to get the application code from there. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does. Thank you.
Yeah. So that is the reason, but I just wanted to show you guys the EFS in the project so you are aware of it. The question might come up during an interview, but at work, I haven't used it before, but I just want, it's something I want you guys to still know of. Okay. For the current task you guys are working on, at this point, you are only just creating the reference architecture for now. Then once you are done with the reference architecture, you will get the application code that you will use the reference architecture you come up with to deploy the application. Do you guys have any other question?
Please, I do.
Okay, go ahead.
I have the same question with this WordPress. So I deleted my EC2 instance. So I tried to mount. I did it the first time. It all worked. Then I deleted my EC2 instance, but I didn't delete the EFS. So I tried to mount the EFS to the new EC2 instance. Then they run the application code. Then what I get is that I should override what I've already have on the EC2, what I have on the EFS.
Okay.
So I don't know where I'm getting that.
Okay. Remember when this is the reference architecture. The first time when we installed WordPress, we launched a setup server here. We installed a setup server. We mounted it to our EFS. That is the command I was showing you. Once we mounted it to the EFS, as we installed WordPress, the application code is being stored here. So during this process, you have installed WordPress and you have stored the code here. Even if you now delete this EC2 instance, it doesn't matter because your code is already stored here. Like you said, you deleted the EC2 instance, but you didn't delete the EFS. Your code is stored here. So what you are doing is when you now launch an EC2 instance, you are trying to install a code that you already have here. So that is why it's telling you, do you want to overwrite the one you already have there? Does that make sense?
Yes.
So that's the thing about the EFS, because the first time you mounted it successfully and you installed WordPress successfully, you've already stored your code here. So as you are launching new EC2 instance, you don't need to install WordPress again. You just need to mount your EC2 instance to the EFS and it will get the code. And to prove that to you, if you look at the script we are using this is the EC2 instance we launch when we create the application load balancer. If you look at this script, you can see there is nowhere on this script where we are installing WordPress. On this script, it goes back to the concept that I told you guys in the beginning. We are only installing the necessary softwares that our server needs to function, which here, if you look at it, we are installing PHP. We are installing Apache here. We are installing PHP. And we are installing MySQL. That's the only thing we did. We didn't install WordPress in this script. We installed the softwares our server needs to run, and we mounted our server to the EFS because the application code is already here. So we don't need to install WordPress again. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does. Thank you so much.
Okay, no problem. Does anyone else have any question?
So we should be able to see the code that resides in EFS if we go in there and look for it, right?
Exactly. If you go into your EFS, you will see all the WordPress code in there. And how you will see all the code in your EFS is any code you see in your HTML directory, they are in the EFS. Because you remember that when we installed WordPress here, we mounted our EFS to the HTML directory. So meaning that if you want to see what is in the EFS, go into the HTML directory. Does that make sense?
Yes, thank you.
Yeah, if you don't understand, let me know. But a good way to test it, to test the theory is delete your EC2 instance and launch another one and mount it to the EFS and go into the HTML. But before you mount it, and remember that this HTML directory, you only get the HTML directory after you have installed Apache. So that is why you are seeing that in our script we are using in the application load balancer. When we launch the EC2 instance, the first thing we do is install Apache, right? Once we install Apache, we install PHP version 7.4, which is this ones here. Once we install PHP, we install MySQL. These are just the only softwares that our server needs to run. Those are the only three things we did here. Then once we've done that, we mount it to our EFS. And at that point, if you go in the HTML directory, you will see all the application codes there. Notice that on this step, for the application load balancer, we are not installing WordPress. Okay, does anyone have any questions? All right, so what I'm going to start doing is, so you guys don't join the Zoom and off to somewhere doing other things. I'm going to start calling, starting next week, I'll start calling you guys out. Well, not calling you out, but you would have to give an update of, we would do a stand-up, and whoever has their ticket on the board, you would have to give an update on your ticket, just a brief update within 1 to 2 minutes. Within 1 to 2 minutes, just a brief update on your ticket, the progress you've made with it, and if you are, what update you have, and if you have any issues. So I'm just trying to hold you guys a little bit accountable to make sure you are doing the things you need to do. You guys have been doing very well completing your work, but this session is also meant to be interactive too. So starting next week, if you have a ticket on the board, you would have to give an update on your ticket, and it would expose you to how the daily stand-up is. And that's what we will do starting next week. I wanted to do it today, but you guys had a lot of questions today. So we'll start next week, but I'm letting you know now, yes, we'll start next week. Well, if you are joining from work, that is fine. You don't have to. If you are joining from work, let me know, and that is fine. You are, that would be the only exception. But if you are at home, you would have to give a stand-up. But if you are joining from work, that is fine. Do you guys have any other questions? Okay. So I think we covered a lot this week. I'm going to clean up the video and upload it so you guys can have access to it. Continue to work on your project. When you are ready for an assignment, reach out to me and I will assign the appropriate tasks to you for that project. That is it for today. Thank you guys. Have a good weekend and I will see you guys next week. And I'll also talk to you throughout the week. Thank you.
Aziz, I'm still waiting.
Yeah, I didn't forget you.
Okay, thank you.
No problem.
Yeah.
Right.
Aziz, please, where do you usually upload the video?
I upload the video on YouTube. All the videos, this session and past session are in a playlist. I will share the link to the playlist in the Slack channel. You are in Slack, right?
Yes, please.
Yes, I will send it to you on Slack.
Okay, sure. Thank you.
No problem. All right, I'm going to end the meeting here. Have a good weekend, everyone. Biodun, I'm going to send you a different link.
Okay, thank you.
All right. Bye.
Where am I going to receive it? On my email?
In Slack. You're in Slack, right?
Okay, Slack, yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Bye.